Hello, everybody. So, week 8, we're pretty much at the end. I have a big project due end of this week. You want to get to me early, you don't have to wait till the last minute. You're near finished, go ahead and submit that. But it's the final week, so everything does need to be turned in this week. The end of the class, as far as what was is listed on the schedule, is a hard deadline. So 11:59 p.m. on Sunday night, which is different from our normal due dates in this class. So we have Monday, but the semester or the course ends Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So please make sure you get everything to me before then. That's a hard deadline. I never accept anything after that final moment of the course. And then first thing Monday morning, I'll wake up and finish up the grading, and I wake up early. I usually have the grading finished and grades submitted by like 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, wake up very early in the mornings. So we're almost to the end. We've hit all our major course learning objectives. So I want to talk about some other things that will be useful, that I found to be useful, helpful, neat little things. There's still a lot we can talk about. We barely scratched the surface in 8 weeks. Hopefully you feel like you started to get a good solid foundation of HTML and CSS. The CSS is pretty much always like what we were doing in this class. We use style sheets. We use those everywhere too, because there is a standard for styling things in one place. So other places, when they needed to pick a way to set styles, went ahead and went with the one that is already a standard so that people don't have to learn something new. So in most of our programming languages, most of the GUI packages that we would use to think about the user interface, except CSS. So we use that all the time. The HTML, if you're in this class, you're in the pathway to eventually build frameworks and do custom projects with frameworks, not build your own. And when we do that, we will write programs that type the HTML for us. A whole lot easier if the computer has all those tags in there. But as the developers, we're the ones that have to write the code that writes HTML. And so hopefully you feel like you got a good foundation on that, because at some point in the future, you're very likely to have to write the output of another program needs to add in all those tags with the classes and IDs and everything we've seen in HTML so far this semester. And some other markup languages. I wanted to talk about that some, because that's not the only markup language that exists. So we'll take a quick look at a very, very common one. Maybe mention a couple others. And at least one markup language that doesn't use the tag style, it uses a different notation. It's also a very useful one to have in mind. A bunch of odds and ends, things that'll be useful to see. First one is kind of what we ran out of time for last Friday, and that's another way to set up our links, which can be really useful. It was misused in the past, but let's just jump in and do this as an example. First thing I'm gonna do is go download an image to put on the web page. It's spring, so I'm gonna look for a beach scene, pick images. This one looks good. That looks like a nice little beach to be sitting around on. I tried to download it. Is it a format I can use? Okay, yeah, JPEG, that'll work. How big is that? It doesn't say. Just open. Well, I'll just put it in the web page. So I've got this thing, beach.jpg. There's some sort of image. We've seen that before, right? We often put images in on our web pages. I guess not in. So I'll go ahead and start up the web page for the example. Make it a new folder and call it We never did look at Google Maps, did we? Should look at Google Maps as well. This is a different one. This is what's called an image map. Google Maps is like the embedded stuff. I think we ran out of time that day, but we just go put in a site and they give us copy and paste code to put on our webpage. So nothing fancy there, but we haven't actually seen it, so I just want to include that sometimes, somewhere. I'll just call this maps. Yeah, maybe I want to put the image on here. So add a couple break tags. Whoops. Another line break tag, and then in between them, I'll stick an image tag. Source is going to be beach.jpg. And that's probably good for now. Need to copy that file, that image over so that it's in the same directory as this. Or download. So nothing new there. Okay, that looks like a good size for the website. It's nice to have our page. We probably want to make some adjustments for phones and all that. Y'all seen how to do that. But maybe we have an online retail store. Oh, which reminds me, I've been going through putting points back on the quizzes. I've gotten a little bit behind on that. But I was reminded it was pointed out, there was a question that I overlooked when I took things out of the question bank. So there's a question on there that asked about e-commerce in 2016. And I really meant to remove that. Yeah. That's for a history class, right? We care about what the top e-commerce stuff was in 2022. So I overlooked for removing that one. So just mark whatever. You'll definitely get the points back. That question. Meant to say that in the beginning, we kind of got sidetracked. But maybe we have an e-commerce site where we're selling things like chairs that would sit on a beach, or those big fancy umbrellas. And the classic saying is, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It'd be nice if we could make it so that people could click on this chair right here and turn that into the add to cart stuff, or the shopping page. Jump over to our shopping page and then show all the chairs. So that's what an image map is for. We can turn spots of this. We can map certain areas of this image to links. We need to find out what the areas we want to connect to are. And we basically have 3 shapes we can look for. I'm drawing on the board. So one of our basic shapes is going to be a rectangle. And to define a rectangle, we need 2 points. Everybody's seen that before. If we know the XY coordinates of this point, I'll put X1, Y1. And we know the XY coordinates of this point, then the difference between the X's tells us how wide that square is, and the difference of the Y's tells us how tall it is. So that's all we need to define a rectangle. A circle is a nice, easy shape too. One of the definitions of a circle is all the points equidistant from the center. So to define a circle, all we really need to know is where's the center and how much is the radius. And that'll tell us all the information about a circle. And another common shape is going to be a polygon. That kind of encompasses all of them. It's how many sides we have. So a rectangle or square, a rectangle is going to be a polygon with 4 corners, 4 sides. A circle is a polygon with infinite sides. So we can get any of those, or a polygon with 3 sides. That's what I'm going to draw for the picture, which also has 3 corners. We can define that shape by just listing out the corners one at a time. We can't shortcut it like we did the rectangle. We could just list out 4 corners to define a rectangle as well. That one's just special. So like X1, Y1, X2, Y2, and X3, Y3 would be enough for a triangle. And however many sides our shape has, we just define all the corners, and the computer can fill in the lines between those corners. So we have these shapes to mark out. We can mark out spots on the picture if you know the coordinates of them, and then turn those into links. So if I jump back over to sharing screen. Oh, there it is. Oh, the sharing screen yet. There we go. I hit all the buttons for sharing the screen. We need to mark out some spots on this where we would think a clickable object is. We need to get our coordinates for it. So one easy way to do that is you open it with just simple graphic software. So I'm just going to open it with Microsoft Paint here. What? Open with Paint just once. If you notice down in the status bar at the bottom, it's kind of hard to see with my mouse here. But as I move my mouse around, notice that it's showing the coordinates of where the mouse is on that image. So we can find all of our shapes that way. So I guess the cloud over here might be a good starting point. Mark something to click on the cloud. So that looks like a good center. So 1001, 256. So I'm gonna make some notes. So like a cloud, and do that as a circle with a center at 1001, 256. Radius it looks like if I go 50 pixels, I just did kind of move my mouse over a little. Okay, 50 pixels is still on that cloud, draw a circle around, make it noticeable. So just making some quick notes on there. For an umbrella, we could probably just draw a whole big rectangle here. Right? Just cover that whole thing. So up here somewhere, 34, 141. $34, 141 to so it's like the corner of it right around here. 592, 245. And if you downloaded a different picture, obviously you might have to check for different coordinates. I forgot what I tried to pick there. 592, 245-ish. Doesn't necessarily have to be perfect here. And maybe this chair, probably do that like a polygon. So I'll start up here and draw it. So making something like this, over, down, and back up. That looks like the spot that would mark out the chair. And as long as you don't save marks like that, it doesn't hurt to put them on there. So the other one would be a big square up here. That's not very square-like. should use my actual pen. And then a circle over here somewhere. CR3 basic types of shapes. We need these coordinates. So like, looks like the first coordinate is here at 226, 433. Here, 246, 443. And we'll see in a moment, they just go in order. So it always goes X, Y, X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. And we just add as many points as we have sides to define. So when right around here, I guess my mouse doesn't show on the video very well. If I came over to the next corner at the top, 29, 445. Down here somewhere, 365, 517. You just need some sort of software where you can pull up those coordinates for the picture specifically. Front of the chairs, 500, 511. I'll put that in the comment. 500, 511. 500, 576. And then maybe one more corner right here at 245, 588. So the polygons obviously take a lot longer. The circle, you just find that center point and about how far out it goes. Squares, you just need a couple points, but depending on the shape you want to mark out, it can get a little bit tricky. If I need that picture again, I'm going to do those. And then we can turn this image into, we can map those spots we just found to links, but they don't seem like the normal usage of links. I often like the word buttons better. It's like buttons on there. Which one place I found this useful for like games developed to go on mobile devices. They're going to be on a touch screen. I'll draw a picture of a controller and then turn that picture of a controller into an image map. That would not work in speed critical games, but for strategy games where you don't need, where speed's not an issue, that's a good way to get a controller right there on the touch screen. Touch screens are a little clumsy and slow to react for certain types of games. The high impact, the high activity games, it's hard to get a touchscreen controller. But for nice slow strategy games or something, image map nicely. So we need this attribute here. We want use map equals hash and then some sort of ID of each. So it's an ID, and well, the ID goes in the other part. So when we actually make a map, we'll add in a map tag and a name equals beach pick. Sorry, it looks like an ID because we use the pound sign, but make sure the map, where you actually set the map, it gets the name attribute, not the ID. That's a really easy one to get. Oh, the symbols are inconsistent. We usually use that for IDs, but yeah, now we just set up an area for the map. So with an area tag, we shape equals circle, and chords equals, and then the circle again needs 3 numbers, which we already have 3 numbers for. I probably could have just pasted them in. Typed them in like they were going to go in here. So the X, Y, and then the radius of our circle. That's enough to give us that information. So I guess I can go ahead and save this and jump back over to the web page. So right now, still not seeing any difference on there. But we need to, some of y'all probably already guessed what's still missing at this point. We need that to actually go somewhere. I don't know, pull up circle in Wikipedia. That sounds like a good place to link to. It's at least or clouds. That's what I meant. Circle's the shape, but it's marking a cloud. So if somebody wants more information about a cloud, they can click that. And that more information is kind of a spot this was missing in the past. I don't know who did it originally, but a number of other companies followed suit, where there's things like, if the company logo is a picture of a clown, and there's certain things that would make the investors in the company very, very unhappy. But it would be illegal not to tell us that. They would make like an alternative homepage that had the announcement about that stuff. But in order to get there, you'd have to click on the clown's nose, then you go to a different homepage that has different links, and then one of those links to the bad news. So that's been done several times. Don't give image maps a bad name, but that's an ethical issue, right? If somebody's paying, bosses tell you to do that, how do you respond to that? Ethics is a different class. But it is something that's happened before. So now that we have a link there, notice whenever we hover over that cloud, it switches to the link icon. Then I'm going to add something else in that actually showed up in a previous class. Somebody asked a question, and we dug around and found a way to do it. We'll get to that in a second. So the more examples of the area tag, shape could be a rectangle. And then our coordinates, it goes like x1, y1, x2, y2. We need those 4 numbers in there. Which I got from here, but I probably could have just, since that was just random notes, I probably could have just went ahead and typed them up the way they needed to be first off. Taking notes along the way makes that a lot easier. That's definitely one that I learned, I guess, the hard way from doing it a couple times, was take the notes first and then come back and put in the areas. With the hyperlink reference going to, because this is the umbrella, right? Oh, just look everything up on Wikipedia. Which really just gives us some place to go. When you put this in your project, or some of y'all's projects might fit very, very, image maps might have a very nice place in there. Right? If there's going to be a lot of graphics heavy stuff, you have pictures you want to show people, set it up so that you click on different spots of the picture. A zodiac image was the one popping in my mind first, like a picture of a full zodiac. You make each one of the animals going around there clickable and head off to somewhere else. So we have one more here with shape equal poly for polygon, which poly is just the prefix that means many. So many sides. So we have to have at least 3 sides to make a closed shape. 2's not enough. So in order to make it clickable, we do have to have that. So a triangle or beyond, I think everybody's had a geometry class by this point, right? All the shapes you would know about. Stop signs. I can see a lot of places where it's making a picture of a stop sign might make sense. And the chords is that big list from earlier, and the hyperlink reference. I'll just go to Wikipedia again. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say about chairs. A chair is a type of seat. I guess that's useful if you already know what a chair is. And then our chords, got this long list of all the points. And again, it's X1, Y1, X2, Y2, X3, Y3, however many points you pull up, it's just X, Y, X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. Just go through it. Paste that in here. So now all of our stuff, go to the umbrella. Click on it and get to the other one. It didn't show up till late in the semester, so I'll add this in here as well. We also have this target one. That used to make a big difference in the early days of the website. We could open things in a new browser, in the same tab, in a new tab, in subframes. So we could create a new frame inside on the page we were on and load it in that frame. There was a whole bunch of options, but most of them were kind of filtered out over the years. So the default one, obviously, y'all have seen that before. We just put a link there, it opens in the same tab. Our tab navigates somewhere else. But when you do that, people leave your page, and then we don't have a guarantee they're going to come back to our page, which we want people to come back to our page. So we do still have underscore blank as one of the options for target, and that will open in a new tab, which can also be really, really useful. I'm going to put that in all of these. So copy that. Add some space because that's hard to read. There we go. Paste it in there and paste it in there. There we go. That way we don't leave our page and go over and see the whole what an umbrella is and all of that. I guess the one that you search for is actually Paris. Because we wouldn't hang out for blocking the sun, not the rain. But that word made more sense when I was typing a moment ago. And we can link to other things. So it can be a very useful thing. And notice we can try to see the come down over here. They're not really outlined where we can see them clearly, but I guess we could add in circles and stuff. I guess right here you can kind of see that if I hover my mouse there where we go, we have that odd shape. So that's image maps, can be useful. They have been misused in the past. It's not the fastest way to go. It's not as fast as the other links, but that was a lot more noticeable back in 1995, right? If I click on it, it opens a new tab pretty quick still. Here in 2023. So the fast issue isn't like what it used to be, but in the place I've used them the most is when I make game engines. And if somebody opens that on a mobile device, they get a picture of a controller there. So they have something that looks like a game controller. But for strategy games, not good for like fighting games. Way too slow for that. Other things, but it's hard to say what these links are, right? So this question came up a couple years ago while teaching this class. So can we get a way to do that? And it's actually something we looked at last week. We tried a couple things. You remember we did that abbreviation tag? And I think our example was NFL last week. People internationally might not know what NFL is. So we hover over that. I think we just spelled it out, National Football League. We probably should have put an addendum since that's I was referring to international in that example, probably should have put it in American football, not what the rest of the world calls football. But that gives us the little hover text. So if we add an abbreviation tag and give it some sort of title, what was this? This was a cloud. Abbreviation tag with a title of umbrella. Probably should be parasol, but so a way that's not the traditional usage. And that also, learning that, I've been making image maps for years, but somebody asked that question in class. And it's led to something that I have done on every image map I've done since. Remember, asking questions is good. Don't be afraid to ask questions because they can lead to very, very good things. Kind of pop in somebody's mind and they randomly ask, can we see what that is? And then we get the little hover text along with our image button. Which in some of those issues that I mentioned, image maps have been used for before. If you're the developer, you could sneak that in and try to skirt around that ethical issue of whether the things hidden behind images are actually there on the website or not.
And then you can go put it in the comments.
A couple things, yeah, because obviously that led to a long debate, right? It led to very, very long debates in actual courtrooms. But last I heard, it was on the website. They did not fail to produce the information. They didn't make it easy to get to. It wasn't obvious. The law doesn't say it has to be obvious. They have to present it in an obvious way. It just says they have to present it. But that's something that's happened before. Image maps can be useful, especially if you have something that's very image heavy, and then you don't have to add words just to get links. We can just click right on the words. Let's see, we looked at domain. I'll put this one. I'll go look at this. Any questions about image maps? We'll see some more stuff about shapes here before too long. Maybe Wednesday. Because I do want to keep lecture time kind of short these days. The next one I had, oh yeah, I was going to look at this too. I'll look up where maybe take Sellersburg. When we go there, it gets right to the Google Maps stuff, right? I think everybody's seen that before, right? Because we have a share button. So I come over to the share button, there's an embed tab. So it's exactly like the iframe stuff, the embedded stuff we saw before. We just ran out of time that day. But since we just made a file called maps, we might as well throw this in there, right? We ran out of time for this the day about embedded sharing. Sounds like a good name, but it fits with the title here. So some of y'all's projects might have a need to have the Google Maps stuff. And just like the rest of that embedded stuff we saw, they give you the code and advertising for when you sign up for AdSense. They give you code like that, you copy and paste it into your website and you get a paycheck. Targeted advertising is really, really easy. They really, really, really want to put that on our page. So as far as making money, monetizing things from the software development degree, it does not get easier than putting ads on a web page. Make a tutorial or something, All you need is a webpage that people are gonna come look at, and they will start, they will send you money for it. And they will do all the work. All you have to do is copy, paste, everything else they do for you. And copy, paste, and tell them where to send the check. It's definitely one of the easiest things to monetize in the whole school of IT. But we got all the regular Google Map stuff. Oops. It's embedded, so we have to do control zoom. Way down here, our classroom. Here's the fountain. Our classroom's right around here in the building. For those who haven't come to campus. But yeah, we haven't actually seen that, and including a map might be useful for some of your projects. I don't think it's a requirement. I took out the requirement of including a map, or at least I meant to, but I did make several copy and paste mistakes as I was getting courses ready. Any questions about that? You don't get much easier than that. So let's look at something else here. So technically, a little technicality here, and this is one that you will probably never do. I just like to show it at least once in class. You'll probably never do what we're getting ready to do unless you like happen to teach an HTML class and want to prove that it's possible. So technically, any way we have to feed instructions into a machine, we can give any instruction that machine accepts. That's not always feasible, but doing that, we can do dynamic stuff in markup languages. We can, let's do some simple math. That'll be a good enough example. We'll just set up something doing math in HTML. I'll put that in the tag. So down here, I want to set up a form element so we can have some inputs. I keep pushing the wrong button. Must be thinking about a different text editor. Excuse me. We'll set up a form element that we can do some stuff on. So the Pythagorean theorem is good. That's a nice little thing to check, right? A standard everybody's seen before. Or remember that a squared plus b squared equals c. That does apply to any dimensions. So if you're in three-dimensional space, a squared plus b squared plus c squared equals d squared. It does add up like that. And this is one, yeah. There are much better languages than HTML to go do math with. HTML is good for making the form, but we can do the math right here. So this is just proof of concept. Proof. The only time you'll ever need to do this really is if you ever have to prove to somebody that it's possible. But technically, anything we do in any manner we have of passing instructions to a machine can technically pass in any instruction that machine accepts. So all the dynamic stuff is possible for markup languages, but it's just not feasible. That's why we keep the markup languages for encoding rather than scripting. And we do scripting stuff places that are better for scripting. So I'm gonna make a thing here, and I'm gonna type this out of order just to try to keep it straight. So I'm gonna do like 3 input first, and I'll come back and fill in the details for them. Input plus input equals span. Work. Oh, I'm surprised nobody has asked about this next one yet. So we have this input. So this is going to be our A thing, right? So That's some attributes to that. Input with type equals number, which from a previous quiz, I know several people missed that when I was putting points back on. There was one popular GUI package that called the number input spinners. And some, I guess whoever wrote the quiz a couple weeks ago, and then like module 4 or 5, put that in as a question, like which one gives a spinner. So the number input is the one called the spinner. It refers to the little arrows over at the side. With the number, we have the number arrows. That's why they called it a spinner. Not what I would have called a spinner. Like those date inputs where you spin it. That seems like a spin. That seems like it should have that name. But that's a name that a lot of people don't use. That was another question on the quiz. Is no matter what you put there, you automatically got the points. Let's see. So that's a number. Spinner input, I guess. ID equals A, so A squared. Oh, since this is the spinning part, it'll spin by how much do we increment by? 0.001. We'll set a starting value of 0. It's the Pythagorean theorem. We want A squared, right? And not every single time, but usually this shows up before we get to this example at the end. In order to write A squared, we need to get superscripts. But the question hasn't shown up yet this semester. We have a tag for it. So for the superscript up top, it's SUP. And for the subscript, it's SUB down at the bottom. But we do have tags for those. Usually they show up before now. So I'm going to copy and paste and put that beside every one of those inputs. And then the span, where that output goes. So I can go ahead and do that. So ID equals output. We'll need that at some point. Or I can probably make it C. Yeah, I'll make it C. I was going to throw a problem, but the output has to have the name attribute. So the inputs get IDs and the output gets a name. All this number type stuff, I'll just copy and paste right over from that. And I guess I'll just go ahead and split this up on several lines because it's hard to read here. There we go. So A squared plus B squared give us C squared. So we need to do that calculation. We need input. I'll do it on input. So we have lots of event listeners built into every HTML tag. That was another one. There was lots of comments on the quizzes. The listener is what just sits there and detects the event. And then the handler is the code we write for when that event is detected. So the handler is like the function over in your JavaScript. And the listener is the thing built in here that will notice when somebody inputs something into the form in this case. That way we don't need fancy buttons or anything. We don't need any buttons or anything. It says we just type numbers in there. It'll recalculate. So this attribute, we type the stuff here. We want to look at that C, which the output gives a name. Output requires a name. So C, and we just want to change the value of it. I'll change this. This will look a lot better. I should have done this to begin with. That way it matches the input. So we have input. We do have an output tag, which is pretty much just used for this thing. Or it's nice and semantic whenever you put a form together. You have a bunch of JavaScript happening. There is an output tag I'm used to just using spans in the middle of a paragraph and changing the text inside that span. But there's an output value, so we gave it the name C, and then that's going to be assigned Pythagorean theorem, which let me write it. I'll write it on the screen here. I'm about to. That's probably quicker than sharing. So y'all are probably used to it. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That's not a good color. That's the way you're used to seeing that. But we need to solve for C itself. Computers can only do functions, right? One output for any given input. If there were two possible outputs for a single input, that's going to crash a computer. So you remember that word from math class, a function. There's one and only one output for any given input. Multiple inputs can give the same output. They can repeat outputs, but we can't have two inputs giving us the same output. So to solve for C, we need to take the square root of it. And then just from algebra class, if we do it to one side, we need to do it to the other one. So another way we could write this, and the one that shows up a lot more when we're programming, would be C is the square root of A squared plus B squared. That's a much more programmer-friendly version of that, because that's two versions on the output can give us problems. So there are those. Yeah. So we need to grab the square root of it, which is built in. So that's something we can ask for, math.square root, sort of the standard abbreviation for square root. And that's going to be a dot value times a dot value. There's special functions for squaring, but a lot of times it's quicker just to type. If we're just squaring, it's quicker just to multiply them together.
The second dot didn't.
Oh, thank you. Dot value, yes. So it is something about that input, not the input itself. Let's speed up. Let's speed up. Why doesn't it like that? Oh. I didn't put too many quote marks on there. Yeah. It's an HTML attribute, so everything over here needs quote marks. We do not need to nest any quote marks inside of there. Any of y'all that have had other programming probably know immediately that it's a lot easier to do that in other programming languages, but it would basically look identical to this, right? You'd have your 3 variables, and probably use the math square root function, but you want to write a square root function. So notice there's nothing going on here, but if I start adding some stuff in, so like 1 squared plus 1 squared shows us the square root of 2 squared. 3, 4, 5 triangle. This one of the more famous ones. Really just a proof of concept. I seriously doubt you will ever need to do that unless somebody just doesn't believe you that it is possible to do math with HTML code. But yeah, prove it to somebody, but it's possible. Showing that technicality. Any language we have that can pass instructions into a machine can technically pass in any instruction that machine can accept. It's just completely unfeasible at sometimes. Or it's either completely unfeasible or it has been blocked by a security protocol. Because that's also leads to can lead to some major security protocols, like writing, just like JavaScript. We couldn't write with a file from here because that would be a major security risk. That would give anybody open access to a computer, to a machine. Any questions about that? The example will be up there. It's not something that's ever going to show up unless you teach a class on HTML and want to show people that it technically is possible. It's just not feasible because that would take 3 lines of JavaScript, 3 short lines of JavaScript. There wouldn't be any word wrap applied here if we did that in JavaScript. So it's much more feasible to do our math there, but just showing that it's possible. Let's see, I have a bunch of odds and ends. Maybe one more for today, because it'll be important with one of the big things I want to go over on Wednesday. But markup language, HTML is not our only markup. There's another one that's used quite extensively in programming. It's actually 3 of them. Let me make a list. So I want to talk briefly about extensible markup language. This is one of our ways of transferring data. It's not as common as it used to be, and there's a reason for that. So has everybody seen some Python code at some point along the way? That's some stuff in Python. I see heads nodding. I'm guessing the ratio, the head nods on the Zoom call is about the same. Has anybody seen C++ code? Or done stuff in Java? See a little bit here, much smaller. So I'm not on the camera, so it was 1 out of 4 in the classroom versus 4 out of 4 have seen Python. Or seem to nod their head for seeing Python, but only 1 out of 4 have seen C++. Or maybe Java, C#, one of the strictly typed. So when we transfer data, there are 2 big ones that we use. The 2 most popular ways to transfer data are XML and JSON. So and when we would choose one or the other is when we know how it's going to be processed on the other side. Best for processing with a strictly typed language. I'm going to put like C family, for example. C++, but if you look at the list of most popular programming languages, everything more popular than C++ was written with C++, or was written with a language that was written with C++, or in the case of Python, is about 5 or 6 steps down that chain of somebody that was a really good programmer and knew C++. They used it to write another language instead of writing their program in C++, and then use that new language to write the program they wanted. There's good reasons why we do that. Also good reasons why we come back to it, but something in that still has that basic C syntax where we have to say we have an integer now. We can't change it. Makes it much faster because then the computer doesn't have to waste any time figuring that out. JSON is best for processing with an open type language. So 2 examples of this would be JavaScript or Python. And JavaScript is the HTML5 standard. Python is the most popular programming language. So most stuff these days is going to be processed with either JavaScript or Python on the other side. So sometimes it seems like we're moving away from that, but there is reasons why we would choose one or the other. If you go to a loosely typed language, that's slightly better over here. Loosely typed, barely better. Having the type data in the loosely typed languages. So that's there's quite a few out there, but those are the ones where we don't have to worry about type data at all. We can recognize them because they start with a dollar sign. Variables always start with a dollar sign, but we take care of that type data by making only one sort of data. There is only one type of data, so we don't have to worry about it. But we do keep information about whether that, even we usually call it a resource. We keep information about whether that resource is an integer or a string or floating point number. We keep it that way. We keep some of that in there, so it does still have some strictly tendencies to it. But it's only barely better than if we were using like nanoseconds, like single digit nanoseconds. You have to really, really care a lot or have a massive, massive, massive data set before those nanoseconds even became milliseconds. So there are reasons why we use one or the other. We're talking about markup languages. So I wanted to take a look at XML. And it's a way to transfer data. So I have sort of a standard example I give in class at different times. So with XML, we have an opening tag. It's not like what we're used to seeing. I'm going to say what version of XML we're using. Probably the 1.0 and how it's encoding. Encoded, sorry. UTF-8 is what you're pretty much always going to use for that. So we'll have that opening tag that says we have some XML. And then we start putting our data in the form of tags. So I have some standard examples. Usually for class data, I use just make up some people, name, age, and town for examples, but it gives us little things like that. Let me save this in odds and ends. Folks.xml. And then the obvious extension there. There is also, right on the board, XAML, which is XAML. You'll see that a lot. That's one Microsoft. There's two M's in it, sorry. XAML, and we pronounce the X like a Z, or the ZH pronunciation. That's the one Microsoft made up. That was Microsoft's proprietary markup language. Y'all have probably heard the name Microsoft. Okay, so that does show up. And there's YML and YAML, but they're all almost like a XML. Those just have some pre-configured tags to use. Some tags that are already built in that we can use, which there are in certain settings of XML. That's one of the things we're going to look at being today. This is a specific setting for them. As for right now, I'm just going to completely make up some tags. So people is going to be composed of a person. And this is where that better for object-oriented thing comes in. Because over in our C++ code or Java code or something, we would have a person object. So then we can set a tag for every attribute in that object. Or to throw out some other names here, a tag for every data field in that object. Data field is also the terminology that shows up in our DBMS 110 class for databases, right? It is not a coincidence that we use that same term in both places. It is very, very much the opposite of a coincidence. I like to express that at least once every class. They look very different in the text files, but the text file is not what goes through the CPU. It is not a coincidence we use the same term for that. But it looks very different. If we think too hardly on that, it starts messes up programming. Because we'll start thinking about what happens in C++ when we put our database together. And we'll go down rabbit holes. So just be aware that, as long as you're aware that the text file is not what goes through there, but for some person data, we made a person type of data. We probably give it a name, an age, and the town they live in. For those who've had me a few classes, you've probably seen me do this data over and over and over again. Sometimes favorite food, if we need like a second database table. I'll just copy and paste that a couple times. Maybe we have a Sally who's 23 from Salem. Charlie who's 58 from Charlestown. Shelly who's 33 from Sillersburg. Corey who's 19, Fordham. So yeah, that's all on my copy and paste. So it's a way to transfer our data. Then we can include other information if we have to recreate. So like if we knew this was going to be processed by C++ code on the other side, we'd already have that object set up to accept a string, an integer, and then another string. But we could add that as attributes. We're just making these tags up. So we make a numeric thing. This is no. Numeric equals yes. I just made that up as a way to tell the difference between the strings and the numbers. And we would have to parse that on the other side. There are things pre-built to parse. Markup languages go in as a tree for those who have studied data structures. It is not a binary tree, but we can turn it into a binary tree very, very, very quickly. The HTML that goes to your browser goes across the internet is just a basic tree, but it does get turned into a binary tree when it gets to Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, whichever one you. So those who have seen data structures, this is a tree. And in just a couple of steps, we can turn it into a binary search tree. Or even a heap. A lot of steps to turn it into a heap if you've seen data structures, but then we'd have a heap to work with, which if you've seen data structures, that's one we want to work with. If I come back over here, notice on my computer, it's set to open with the browser still. I got some error messages. On 23 at column 11, extra content at the end of the document. I don't see any extra content. I spelled something wrong. Sure. It doesn't really give an error message about that. The error messages aren't that helpful. You'll see that one all the time. Maybe it doesn't like those attributes. Oh, those should be good. Looks like everything closes. most of the people when usually close XML. Let's see if it wants that. Oh, yep. Up to the closing tag. We didn't used to have to do that, but notice well, let me do this. Usually this would be the output from another program, right? So if I come through here and get rid of the pretty print in the text file, that is the actual name of it, pretty print, where it's nice and indented and you know, the line breaks. Whoops. Okay, that's probably enough. The first two people, you can see that's one long line. If I turn off word wrap. First two are just one long line, the sort of thing we would get as output from another program. If your program does that and you have to dig through and find a problem, one of the most useful things to do is open it up in a browser, because browsers will automatically show XML in pretty print with the little collapse arrows and stuff. So collapse and expand arrows make it a lot easier to dig through and read. We do still see that some. Most things are going to be processed with JavaScript or Python anymore, and JSON's a little bit easier on the developer side. So if we don't know, most people can this way. But if you know it's going to be processed with something strictly typed on the other side, XML will be considerably better. Or if you have a bunch of data structures set up, if you've studied data structures and know you're going to be processing it, know how you're going to process it, it's already in the form of a tree, so you can quickly convert that into like a binary search tree or a heap or something that is a better way for working with that. For those who've gotten any of those. So that's a common one. We will still see it. Nasdaq RSS feeds. We often see it with RSS feeds. So if we went and grabbed some data, the stock market data, in the narrowed down version, but you can see it's the XML format. Another place I can filter that. But it's just given the whole thing. So we would put together a program. Actually, every bank has this program, and more people around the world, every accountant around the world has a program that does this. That just passes in this URL, gets back to the XML data and parses through it. So I thought I'd point at that because that is one that there's a good chance that you will end up having to write software that receives this data, because that's how NASDAQ sends it out. And keep all the world markets coordinated. There's only a couple of computers to do that. NASDAQ is one of them. 4 around the world, and everybody else just syncs up to those 4. So it's a lot easier to make sure those 4 things are put together. This is 9-minute old data. 9-minute old data is useless, so it's free. You have to pay for the current data. But at the same time, most traders aren't on the floor in New York. But that is something that you might see somewhere. CNN does that as well. CNN newsfeed or RSS feed. Really simple syndication is what that stands for. So if you wanted to grab from something, CNN is probably not the best option there. But you can see here, they constantly send out the stuff in XML format. So does every other major news channel. Or the Associated Press, where CNN and Fox News get it before there are manipulations on it. But it's a standard way to send out the RSS feed. So it's definitely a markup language that you might want to look into or be somewhat familiar with. First thing on tap on Wednesday is the standard for 2D vector graphics is done in XML. So we'll look at that really quick Wednesday. I'll look at one other markup language before we do this. I'll go over to the docs because those two and the other ones that I have listed on, well, not JSON, but XML, YAML. Both of those are pronounced YAML, whether it has the A or not. Maybe I think the A was just added afterwards because everybody pronounced it. But it's still, those are all tag based. We do have other things. So text document is a good thing. Or whatever documented. If we needed to type some math, we can do some things like did the Pythagorean theorem earlier. So I could do I think it's Control-Shift E here. Can't remember the format. Can't remember the format here. Control-Shift U. Well, there's some Control-Shift to get up to the top, and I remember the one from Microsoft. But still, it's hard to write that. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Programmers would probably recognize that because they know the carets used for the or superscripts or the underscores, right? X1 plus X2 equals Y1, something like that. Where some people would be used to seeing that and know that the caret means superscript and underscore means subscript. But other people are just going to be confused. Like those aren't in English. What are those letters for? Fractions might be covered, right? 3/4, that'll automatically turn into 3/4. It's kind of hard to write our math notation. That other way that I showed you about the Pythagorean theorem, C equals the square root of that. Square root of A squared plus B squared. Kind of hard to do that, right? So there is the standard for mathematical notation is a markup language. Let me write the name on the board. It's called LaTeX. It's not latex. It's LaTeX. The original one, tech, the guy was doing a big, huge math paper. And he needed to write the Greek letter chi. Looks an awful lot like an X, but it's not an X. And people kept telling him to use X. And he was getting really, really frustrated because this was like a math dissertation, 30 to 40 pages of math written up. X was all over that document. And X does not mean the same thing as chi. So he said about developing a typesetting language dealing with markup language, which has been through several improvements now and is the standard for how we do math notation. So LaTeX, your browser will automatically render LaTeX. It knows what it is. Document editors all accept them. So if I wanted to do that thing I just mentioned, I'll start with $2 signs to show this, to indicate that that is LaTeX code. It's going to be changed. Then we use backslashes and curly braces to mark up our stuff. So C equals backslash square root. And then in curly braces, we put what we want the square root of. So A squared, kind of like the symbol we just saw, plus B squared. And then when we render that as an equation, I should have copied that first. Let me undo that. Copy that so we can see what the text looks like. And when we render that down, we get the proper typesetting in there. So we can just type it. We add a matrix. That's a real hard one to type, right? A 3x3 matrix. A equals, we just put it in square brackets like that to try to spread it out over a row. I'm gonna use the keyword begin. And what I want to begin is a B matrix. And then it can type some numbers. So like 3 and 4 and 5, then 2 backslashes for a line break. 1 and 1 and 0, 9 and 8 and 7, and end that B matrix. And copy that so that we can talk about it as a markup language. But you still see how that's, it doesn't have tags, but you kind of see how that's still a markup language. We have special symbols where we say where it's starting, where it's ending, some other special characters we use. So it does still count as a markup language, and it's used primarily for encoding, but encoding math stuff in this case. Or piecewise functions, f of x equals a great big curly brace, begin line star, x squared plus 5, line break, 3x minus 4 in the line. Oh, got that. And we get that proper typesetting like we would read in the math book. Makes things look a lot neater. It's a lot to remember, right? So let me add this to the page. So Google how to ... in LaTeX is what you would find. Probably making it look easy because every 10 years of graduate, years of undergraduate level math for that. Am I clear? Computer stuff just. The time, the previous team was more concerned with experience in software development. But degrees in software development when mathematics is related to software. It's like it's related. It's a related degree, and the experience is more interested in actual experience than paperwork. So LaTeX gives us a way to do all that proper typesetting, really nice formatting for the math. Because that's hard to do in the document. You might need that at some point. It can be very, very useful, right? Especially since we do everything on computers anymore, our handwriting has all gotten messier, which makes the math class homework even harder to read than it would be anyway. I'm going to download this as a PDF, and then show one more thing here to wrap up because it's odds and ends, and that'll be it for today. After one more thing, I didn't give it a name. Let me give that a better name. LATE. LaTeX example. And now I'll copy that over to this folder with the other odds and ends. Which I apparently closed out already. Closed my text editor. Continue to do that. How about here with the doing math? I did a couple break tags, put some space, and maybe an HR tag and another break tag or something. So it's spread out. And now I have the stuff I want in a PDF. Try to double click on that. We'll open in a browser. Browsers have no trouble with PDFs, right? But in order to do that, I have to leave the site. I want to put this PDF onto the page. And a really useful one for doing that, and many, many other things, is what's known as an object tag. I'll go with the example. Again, I prepared ahead of time, so it probably looks extra easy when I'm up here doing this. So we would just go look this up, right? HTML object tag in HTML object tag. I already have HTML. Go to our standard reference, or remember CSS tricks usually has .com. It usually has the best reference stuff. So data, notice their first example has a JPEG. And then how big do we want it to be? So this is a blank tag. We load in other things we have. So right now I exported from that document editor and have the PDF. Yeah, I just wanted to look that up to make sure that, like, okay, but I want to show this on the page. I know the browser can render this. So we said our data, right, it's not a source or a hyperlink reference. We're actually grabbing this other piece of data that the browser already knows what to do with. And in situations where we have a file type that the browser doesn't know what to do with, we can define that on the server side screen. So then by the time the page opens, it will be. So object is for basically any object we have to be open with the browser. We have in our case, a PDF. Our LaTeX example, oh, that's what I called it, PDF. And then how big do we want it? With, let's say, I don't know, 700 pixels and a height of 400 pixels. Maybe that'll be big enough to read. In the object. So any type of object you have that you can run through a computer, particularly things that would have an output. So think of a file that you could open like a Word document. That's what that was included in Canvas. Word documents don't normally open with browsers, but when they put Canvas, or I've learned just customizations on Canvas together, they went ahead and used an object tag to say what to do with the Word document. Because teachers that will be using LMS systems a lot, learning management systems a lot, will probably have a lot of Word documents. And notice now we put that PDF right in there with all the controls. We would have the bookmarks, if they're built in, bookmarks, table of contents, everything that would be in the PDF. You have an editable PDF, still an editable PDF. Even has the download button. I'm a site developer. Most people that would go here wouldn't see that. And we can put that stuff right there at time. So an object tag will be another one that will be immensely useful for you in the future that was not included in our course thing. Because this course only showed how to turn things into HTML, but we can do more. Especially, and then PDFs are so common. It's a great way to get your PDF on your page. People don't have to leave your site. So they're still looking at the ads that you get paid for them seeing over in the corner of their eye, and the PDF's right there. So probably could have been a little bit bigger. Notice it did that PDF thing of it automatically picked a size that would work, but we could still zoom to fit, rotate it, or just switch it back to 100% and look at it at the right size. Like, yeah, rotate that around again and look at it in the original size. Those are also parameters we could pass it. We set it up in the tag. Y'all can set that stuff up. Some very useful things and just a proof of concept, just in case anybody ever doesn't believe you that you can do math with HTML code. The dynamic stuff is possible, but you'll never really do it unless you need to prove to somebody that it's possible. Image maps can be very useful, the stuff we looked at earlier, and then Google Maps are just an embedded thing, copy and paste the code. Anybody have any questions about any of those odds and ends looked at today? I see head shaking no here in the classroom. Well, this time of the semester, I like front load courses so that when we get week 8 and there's projects due, there's plenty of time to work on it. So until our scheduled block of time ends at 3:50, I'm just gonna be sitting around waiting for questions to come my way. Have any, let me know. As always, I learn messages and text messages are the quickest ways to get a hold of me, but I'm gonna be sitting in my office, have the email open, phone turned on and other stuff. So that was at least 5 seconds since I asked if there was any questions. No. If you have any, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you Wednesday and we'll look at some more odds and ends and things that I believe will be useful for you for down the road that weren't actually included in the course. See y'all Wednesday.